After his triumphant entry into Jerusalem, Jesus spent the first day with his disciples. As one day approached, he went seemingly alone up to the temple. He wasn't surprised by what he saw. He had seen it before. The outer court that was meant to be a place filled with prayer and supplication as people called out to the God who saved them from the land of Egypt was filled with money changers and people selling trinkets and animals for sacrifice. The sound of prayer was drowned out by the din of commerce. Jesus knew why he had come to Jerusalem, and he knew what he needed to do to accomplish that task. And he walked up to the first table and looked down at the money changer. He put his hand underneath the edge and flipped the table, the coins flipping through the air and jangling on the ground as they hit. And table to table he ran through, throwing over each one. And he shouted, "Have you not read? For it is written, my temple should be a house of prayer to all nations. But you have made it a den of thieves." And he drove them out from the court of the temple, all of the money changers and those selling who brought in commerce into the house of the Lord. But he didn't stand alone in this holy place, because after he drove out the ones who shouldn't have been there, he invited in the ones who should, the ones who needed healing, the sick, the lame, the children. And as he healed those who needed to be healed, the children sang and danced around him and proclaimed, "Hosanna to the Son of David." As somebody who had taught nonviolent resistance his entire life, this calculated move was necessary to show what action could look like, and also to instigate the events that needed to follow. Let's talk about the cleansing of the temple as we walk together today down creation's path. Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie, and I am a Christo-Pagan Druid and priest of Bridget.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm a Christo-Pagan Druid and sous chef to the Dagda.
Today, we're going to be talking about the cleansing of the temple, which could go in so many ways right now, and what nonviolent resistance looks like, especially when it turns to direct action. This is going to be an interesting one because this is one that seems to be in contradiction to the nature and teachings of Jesus leading up to this moment, and it happened for so many reasons. But before we get into all that, if you haven't already, don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the terminology happens to be on whatever the app is you're listening to us on. We do 5 original Christo-Pagan and Druid episodes Monday through Friday, except during Holy Week, where we are going to be doing an episode every day from Palm Sunday through Easter Sunday. So you don't want to miss a thing. All right, let's get into it. Yeah, Jesus flipped the tables. He flipped them.
Yeah.
This is a dramatic moment.
Growing up Christian, this is one of the known parts of the story. You hear this all the time, every year. Around this time, it's taught. I think a lot of non-Christians are probably very familiar with this part of the story because it's been in various popular tellings like Jesus Christ Superstar and other pop fiction things have covered that aspect. But a lot of the nuance around what happens just after that is where a lot of the powerful message comes from. And I think a lot of that gets lost in the spectacle of the Jesus walking in and flipping tables and beating people with a flail to run them off.
Okay, so I'm glad you said that. First of all, when this teaching usually gets brought up, when these stories from the Gospels get built up, one, they tell the first half of the story, not the second half, where he brings in the people who were supposed to be in the court of the temple. And that's a crucial part of the story. Also, you mentioned Jesus having a flail. Notice my version of the story, Jesus did not have a flail in his hand.
Yeah.
This is because of a conflation that happens. In the Gospel of Luke, I believe it is, it's either Luke or John, Jesus actually does this act twice. The first time, not during Holy Week, Jesus is shown with a flail running people out. And that's where that image comes from. It is in none of the stories from Holy Week is Jesus armed when this happens. And that, to me, is really important because I don't believe the other event happened. Because if he had come in armed, the Romans would have taken care of him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something that always bugged me in the back of my brain. It wasn't really necessarily a conscious issue, but it was something just nibbled at the back of my brain. Just like, if he had a weapon, the Roman soldiers would have seized him immediately, because they are on high alert for any revolutionary actions, and having weapons, you're instantly guilty of revolutionary action. Like, they shut that stuff down real fast.
The other version of the story does not take place during the Passover week and actually is framed as happening early in his ministry. So he would not have had the 3 years of ministry had he had done this earlier.
Yeah.
And I think that this was an attempt by one of the gospel writers to try to show that, no, this isn't out of his character. See, he did it before. I think that's why it appears twice. But the first time would have been his last time, because he does it armed. And that would have really shown him as a threat and somebody that would have been higher on the radar of the Romans. That does not appear to have happened. We don't see the Romans really getting brought into the story until close to the end of his life. And a lot of the events of Holy Week were very clearly designed to get Rome's attention, to make sure that he was the only one who died.
But even take us on a slight tangent, we'll come back around to it later in the week, but when he gets a sword, just one, that he holds possession of, the Romans show up and arrest him. He sees him, detain him, and drag him off for a trial. Once again, like, if he had the flail earlier,
Yeah,
a lot earlier.
So I would argue that this moment is actually in line with the nonviolent resistance that he taught. And here's why. Number one, unlike the story with the flail, which, as I've pointed out, is a separate story and is not part of the Holy Week story, and I have already thrown it out. One, he does not attack a person.
Yeah.
He flips the tables. These are not supposed to be here, and he basically removes them. They're where the people should be. And because of the way he says this, it's really hard to express where I think Jesus was in the temple here, because it's not expressly said. But there were 2 courts of the temple. There was what was called the court of the Gentiles, which was the outer court, and then there was an inner court that is different from the inner court, which is where the public sacrifices were held. So think about it like a nesting doll. There are 3 courts that you could go to. The outer one, anybody could go into. Only practicing members of the Judean faith were allowed to go into the second. And I believe only men were technically allowed into the second court. I know only men were allowed in the third. I think women might have been allowed in the second. But in the third, that's where the animals were actually brought to the priests and where the sacrifices actually happened. And then you have the actual temple building itself. Okay. This to me is happening in that second court. And I say that because this feels more, it could happen in the outer. That's perfectly within reason here. But this should be something happening outside the holy precincts. That's really the statement here. Only one of the 3 gospel accounts of this event does it have the phrase "of all nations" in there, which, if he did say a house of prayer for all nations, he was in the outer court. He was in the court of the Gentiles. He could have been in either with the other 2 stories. The point I'm trying to get to here is they had brought commerce into the heart of the temple, because only the priests were allowed to enter the temple itself. No one who was not a priest was allowed to actually enter the temple. You were only allowed in the outer courtyards. And depending on your status, which of the courtyards you were allowed in, which that's a whole hierarchy in and of itself we could talk about. But the actual cleansing that's happening here is proximity to the temple. And I really want to point that out here, because I think some people think that it was an open air temple, and that is not the case. He's been going after the priests. He's been going after the rabbis. He's been going after everybody in his ministry so far. He's already done that bit. He's already had his arguments with the Sadducees and with the Pharisees and with the scribes. And there's a lot of arguments over which group, or if that's a catch-all term for everybody else, who the scribes are that are mentioned in the gospel. But he is now cleansing the place where the people go, because this unjust commercial interest has come in. Now, remember, the money changers, I don't want to go into this in too much detail, but the way math was done in Rome is weird and completely foreign to us. You may know what an abacus is. That was in China. The Romans did not use them. That's a Chinese thing. The way this kind of commerce would work, when you're hearing a money changer, there was a table that had squares marked on it. And so when you went to exchange your money, the money changer would tell you one of these coins is worth so many of these coins. And they would literally put your coins on one square and then move that across this board. And when it landed, told them how much money they owed you in return. Okay. You had to know what all of the things on the board meant for this to make any sense to you. But it was a way for them to demonstrate, see, I'm showing you why you're only getting this much.
It's almost more the points system, like reward points are nowadays, where they intentionally put reward points so it's all confusing magic, so nobody knows exactly what equals what directly, because then they can take the opportunity of advantage.
And they did. Remember, there are no markets or anything. There's nothing that says 1 Roman denarii is worth so many Judean shekels. There's no conversion market like this. It's basically whatever they say. So that's number one. Yeah. And I like your analogy of reward points, but it's almost, what if reward points were that find the ball under the cup game? Because you have to follow the money as it's moving across the board and understand what all the little squares on the board mean to know if they're even doing the math right. Because they could say all the right words and then hand you the wrong amount of money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you might not be familiar with the kind of money that you need to have to spend in the temple, because it's not the same money you use in your regular daily life. So you might not know what a coin of a certain value even looks like. And so money changers were notorious for ripping people off. So that's why they would be at odds here. Also, you were meant to bring your own sacrifice to the temple. And the whole point of having animals on offer at the temple was in case you forgot, or it didn't survive the transport there, or in the case of the doves, you've gotten jostled in the crowd and the cage opened and the doves escaped. It was a last gasp of, oh no, I've lost the animal I'm supposed to bring here. But also from Jesus' point of view, and remember, Jesus is coming at this from a first century Galilean point of view. 500 years before him, the prophets had declared that God no longer wanted blood sacrifices. 500 years before Jesus taught, the prophets declared that what God really wants is your devotion and your compassion, not your burnt offerings. So all of this is moving around in Jesus' head as he walks in and sees this commercial insanity going on. And that people were selling tchotchkes. Like, tchotchkes have always been a thing. We know this from other sites around the world, that temples sold little things that you could take home, like to show that you were actually at the temple. So they probably had those kind of gift shop booths as well. And this is supposed to be a place of prayer, reverence, and sacrifice. So you can only imagine what's going through Jesus's head on that side. But also remember, it is my thesis, I guess is the right word to use here, that Jesus knowingly came to Jerusalem this Passover to die. And you can impute all of the mystical reasons onto this that you want. I personally think that while some of that may have played a role in his head, I think a lot of it was he saw the heat that they were starting to get from Rome and wanted to be the only member of the group that got killed so that the message could outlive him. Personal opinion, that's where my faith is here. And so this act of disruption does a couple things. Yes, it disrupts the temple and the way the temple acts. It was well within his teachings of nonviolent resistance, because he is not attacking the people. He is literally going after the thing that is a problem. He is throwing over the tables. You just see this menagerie of animals escaping because he's opening pens and breaking open cages and stuff, right? All these birds are flying out.
And he's also publicly shaming participants of this system.
Yes.
You have a rabbi in the temple creating commotion so everyone's paying attention, and I'm calling them out. This is supposed to be a house of prayer. You're not supposed to be selling stuff here. Go outside. Like, literally, if they could have gone out front and set up in the street out front, that probably would have been enough.
Or this is why I think that this is happening in that second court, because I don't know that there would have been as much zeal if this was in the outer court, in the court of the Gentiles, because anyone could enter the court of the Gentiles. Even Rome agreed that they could put soldiers in the court of the Gentiles, but agreed not to put them in the inner courts. You know what I'm saying? Like, plaques to Caesar, to the emperor, were on the pillars of the outer court.
Okay.
And Jesus isn't throwing plaques down. You know what I'm saying? That's why, to me, this is happening in that inner courtyard, because the outer courtyard had already been profaned. Like, there are literally graven images, which are such an affront to Judean faith, of the emperor on the pillars of the temple.
In a way, to put that into some modern context-ish, like to try to put it into some modern context, it would be like if you went into your church and where the pews are all at, the actual part where you sit down in the pew to hear the sermon and stuff, they had money changers going on.
Yes.
And animals being sold so that you could then take that up when you go up to the altar.
Yes.
The priest is at. The altar where the priest is at would be the inner sanctum part.
Because it would still be weird if it was out in the foyer, to continue this like example of the modern church. That would be weird.
The hall, that initial hall that you walk into, or hallway. Sometimes it's a hall, but it's hallways.
But see, that's why I'm making that. I spent so long on that, is because I think it is interesting that of the things that are mentioned, there's no mention of him knocking any of those plaques down.
Yeah.
So that's number one. But number two, this is an attack on Rome itself, because Rome taxed all of those sales, all of the money that was exchanged. Rome made money off of these exchanges of currency that were happening here. So this was not just a cleansing of the temple, but this was the first overt attack on Rome. That's why I said earlier that if he had done the flail attack that is recorded earlier in his ministry, Rome would have cracked down, because not only is he making a public nuisance of himself in a way that is threatening to their power, this is a source of revenue for Rome, because Rome is tracking and trying to keep a sense of how much money is being made here, so that their tax collectors can go and get theirs back from this. And remember, Roman tax collectors were allowed to keep a portion of what they collected. So, this is why they were so hated in Rome. They're not just like our IRS. They were allowed to keep a portion of the taxes that they claimed. So
they worked on a commission.
Yes. And so they would often ask for far more than a person actually owed, so that they could keep more money. So, there are tax collectors milling around in these booths, watching every little thing so that they can get an idea of, okay, after this is done, I need to go and get so much money from this person and that person because they did a lot of business today. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of that going on. So this is an attack directly on Rome as well. This is not just a cleansing of the temple. This is his first attack on Rome. Now, having said that, the other half of the story that I find amazing that is never taught in churches, I cannot recall of any of the Holy Week services. And I'm one of those people that has always been religious enough that I attended every service during Holy Week, because I was that person. I know, shocker, right? I cannot recall this passage ever being taught where that second half, where he brings in the sick, the lame, and the children in. It's just him expelling people from the temple. It's not doing the restorative work, because it's not just casting out what's not supposed to be there. Remember, Jesus' teachings on casting out the demons. And we've talked before on earlier episodes about how in a lot of Jesus's teachings, this imperial power that's trying to corrupt, this corrupting power, is an unclean spirit that has to be cast out. You don't just cast it out if you don't put something there to take its place when it comes back. When the unclean spirit comes back and brings his friends, he's just going to take over the house again. Jesus iterates this over and over and over when he's talking about exorcism. So we can actually see this exorcism here. He's casting out the commerce. He's casting out the things that should not be in this holy place. And he's bringing in the people that should be there. Because I doubt he just brought in children. He's bringing in the families. The parents are coming in with the kids, right? I don't think that I can imagine a world in which he's just like, only the kids, parents outside, right?
Yeah.
That does not seem plausible. But he's bringing in the people that should be filling this holy space. He's bringing in the people that should be here for the Passover. And remember, the Passover is one of the 3 times a year that the men of the faith were supposed to go and behold the face of God, which is a whole topic we really need to do a full breakdown on the show. But Dan McClellan has a wonderful video about that over on his YouTube and TikTok channel if you want to go watch that if you don't know what that's all about. But this is one of the 3 times a year that they were supposed to do that. So he's bringing in the people that are supposed to be here. and getting rid of the people that aren't. And this act of restoration is so core to everything that he taught, to the point where if somehow we were able to build a window in time and see that this event did not happen, it's integral to understanding the teachings of Jesus, I would still teach it. Do you get what I'm saying? Because it is that exhibition. We're seeing this is how an exorcism works. You found the unclean thing. And the unclean thing, pay attention, was not the people, it was the table. He flips the table of the money changers. That table I went into detail explaining to you how unjust and corrupt it was and how it allowed them to so easily rob and steal from people. He's flipping over the tables, this very symbol of the injustice and the grifting that was happening here. And he drives out the people that were using those tables, and he brings back in those who are supposed to be here. That is restorative. All of Jesus's teachings are restorative. And when you see events like this, I can't help but think of when they're pushing him because he told the man who couldn't walk, your sins are forgiven. And they go after him for this, and he just responds, which is it easier to say? Your sins are forgiven, or take up your pallet and walk? Because one, from just a pronunciation sense, they're both easy sentences to say. One is wielding a certain kind of cosmic power, right? The other is wielding a different kind of cosmic power, right? Which is it easier to say? And it's making this equivalence of you are healed, you are forgiven. And this is so demonstrated in this moment. The place has been cleansed, and now healing can happen. The cleansing has come in. Your sins are forgiven, right? The cleansing has come in. This place is made fresh and new. It's cleansed again. And now it is a place where healing can happen. This is the gospel in a nutshell in this scene. This is the gospel in a nutshell right here. And hopefully it helps you to understand exactly what it is, the work that we're after. No, we don't necessarily have to be flipping tables and making a public nuisance out of ourselves. But he's going directly after the system of power, which is not just represented by that table, right? But is that table. That table is this crazy system that, remember, Romans also didn't have decimals or anything. And the way the math was done on the table, it always rounded in the money changer's advantage, always.
Yeah. Imagine if you're trying to get your change back and it always rounded down, probably to the nearest $5 mark.
Oh, yeah, because you have to remember how Roman numbers work.
If your change is $9, you're going to get $5 back.
Because there's not 1,000 lines on this table. There was, I think, a 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. And then it went from 5 to 10 to 50. I don't know that I think some tables may have had a 30 in there, but it didn't have all of the numbers on it either. So if you wanted to buy something for me for 7, well, that's 5 plus some, and now I'm on the 10 marker. You owe me 10. Yep. But when I'm going the other way, you gave me 10 in value, so I need to figure out where it goes the other way. I am moving the coins over to the 5 column, and now I get to take half of it in profit, basically.
Yeah. So instead of giving you 7 back, you get 5 back.
Yeah.
Instead of you paying 7, you pay 10. Yeah. It's
like this. It's hard to imagine because we don't do math like this anymore.
Oh, yeah. We don't even do math like this. And there's a good reason why we don't do math like this. Because once people started wising up to it, they got furious and violent. And we need to redo math, and redid math, which was good because it needed to be done better.
And by the way, that didn't happen to the late Middle Ages, early Renaissance, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when they first brought in the Indian Arabic number system, the same people that were using these same tables in Venice and throughout Europe said that, oh no, this is sorcery because you have to learn these arcane symbols to understand. What we're doing is so clear. You can watch as we move it around on the table. We're being honest with you because you don't have to understand this strange writing, which is one of the most laughable arguments I've ever heard. But this was, like I said, this system was in use throughout the Middle Ages. There's a good chance that when Leonardo da Vinci went to buy paint supplies, he bought them with somebody who was using one of these tables to calculate how much he owed them.
On a fun context tangent, because I always love putting things into context, that system went away roughly the same amount of time ago from us today in this present age as the blood sacrifices in the temple went away for Jesus.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about 500 years. So if you want to understand how far detached blood sacrifices in the temples were to Jesus and how long they said, hey, this needs to stop, it's the same amount of time as that counting system for math was for us, roughly.
And I don't want to,
Like, it's that foreign, that far ago. Like Leonardo da Vinci, like that far ago was the same distance as the other
and I know somebody's going to take it
reference earlier.
and I know somebody's going to take me out of context and put it in the comments, and it's probably there already because people don't listen to the end. And if you do, I'm just going to comment, listen to the end. But don't think that I was saying that temple sacrifice was outlawed 500 years ago. I'm saying the prophets said.
The prophet said.
Now, also, yeah, full stop. Also, we don't know how consistent temple sacrifice was because we don't know exactly when the second temple was initially built. And we have only scant records about all the upgrades that Herod made to the temple. He wanted the Jerusalem temple to be a wonder of the world. And there's a every chance that the temple had been closed for an extended period of time during those renovations because they rebuilt the entire building. They rebuilt the entire site. Those walls that we think of as the old temple walls in Jerusalem today, the Western Wall, Herod built that. That is not the wall that goes back to the time of David. Herod built that wall. Going to Jerusalem, yes, has always been a thing, but active sacrifice on this site was spotty after the return from the exile and over the time with the rebuilding of the temple, because that all had to happen. The only temple in what is now what we consider the Holy Land that has not had an interruption in sacrifice at it is Mount Gerizim, and that's a whole other story. Yeah, enough for this week.
One last thing, just to bring this back around and get us ready for our closing, is when we're talking about this resistance that Jesus taught, we could learn so much for our modern day, because you'll see these resistances pop up where they'll get vocal, they'll get active, they'll call out, they'll socially shame what's being wrongly done. Sometimes they'll get it right and they'll actually attack the principality behind the individuals involved. But what they forget, they don't do that second step. So often they don't go, and here is the replacement. Here is what we're going to fill this space that we've just emptied with. But instead, they just leave an empty space. And just like in exorcism, when you leave that empty space, the evil returns and returns stronger. It fills that void.
It will, yeah.
And we see this I see it especially in the States. I won't speak beyond the States, but at least in the States, we'll see these resistances rise up and be like, yeah, this is terrible. You're socially shamed, blah, blah, blah. And then they stop. And then the thing that they were opposing to, that principality just goes back in and fills its space back up. And oftentimes worse. And the problem just comes back up again 4 years, 8 years, 12 years later, sometimes a couple decades later. Like, we can look at Reagan and look at right now. There was opposition to Reagan, and then they left that space void, and it's been filled now with something worse.
You can look at what happened with Nixon. You can look at what happened with Reagan. You can look you can look at what happened with Clinton, with George W. Bush, what happened with Barack Obama, and what happened with Trump's first term. And you can't be surprised that we're where we are.
Yeah.
You just can't be surprised.
Yeah. Because they didn't fill that space with the proper things.
Correct.
Things that should be in that space.
But this is a problem that goes way back.
Yeah. They flipped the table, started really get out, and then said, okay, I'm going home. So you need to bring in the families. You need to let the children play. You need to heal the sick. You got to do the second half of the story.
So I'm curious what you think. This probably isn't the way you've generally heard the story of the cleansing of the temple. And I'm curious to know what you think. Do you have anything to add? Do you think I'm taking things too literally here? I think that's usually the thing that I get accused of when I talk about Holy Week, is that I take events way too literally and I'm trying to root them too far into their historical context for what was going on. I'm curious. Let me know in the comments what your opinions are about this and what lessons we can learn about this today. Because the one thing that we haven't mentioned here is that he did this attack on the Roman system in a way that he could not be instantly arrested for it, as this was technically an attack on the money changers in the temple. It was not a direct attack on the temple, nor was it a direct attack on any Roman institution that could have gotten him immediately arrested. It was a
tax collectors.
correct. It
Yep.
was a smart, strategic moment that put him into a gray area of the law and begins that wheel rolling that would lead to his arrest, which we will see tomorrow and the next day as we go through, especially tomorrow, where we go through his interaction with the people over, well, what rights do you have to say all of this, and his very stern proclamations about the end of days. Bum, bum, bum. Holy Week is an amazing time. So let me know what you think about the cleansing of the temple. If you're listening to us on YouTube, Spotify, or creationspast.com, you can leave a comment right there. If you're listening to us anywhere else, even if they say you can leave a comment, they do not notify us, so we will not know. So leave a comment there anyway, because engagement is magic. And then head over to creationspast.com, click on chat, and you can leave your comment there, and we will be able to see it and get back to you. While you're there, if you happen to have a few dollars you can pass our way, we offer monthly and annual memberships. You can also support us on Patreon and Ko-fi. I am CE Dorset on both. You can also support us using the Cash App #, Creations Pass. Thank you to everybody who does that. It really does mean the world to us. You help us to keep the lights on, keep a roof over our head, and food on our table. If you don't have any money right now, or you don't know if we're the kind of people you want to give your hard-earned treasure to, that's fair and perfectly all right. But if we've ever said or did anything that has helped you out or that you think would help out others, please share it with them. That helps us out more than you know. And as we are heading out this week, O most blessed Mother, who taught your son to stand strong in the shadow of Sepphoris, who taught your son the way that he should live and work, who molded him into the image of God that he was. Help us to stand strong before all of the tyrannies in our lives, and help us to know how to bring truth to power in ways that are smart, strategic, and bring cleansing and restoration. Amen.
Amen.